Hey guys, Adam with AeroWorks Productions and BlackOpsDrones.com. Today I'm here to talk to you today about the DJI Phantom 2 Vision Plus. Now this is probably one of their most popular copters right now. And from all of the reviews on the forums and the YouTube videos, we recognize that a lot of people that are new to the hobby are having some issues with the Phantom Vision. And so what we wanted to do today is kind of go through what we do at Black Ops Drones when we get a new Vision Plus in. We're going to take you from unboxing to identifying all the components, parts, and pieces, to charging, firmware and software updates, and then following it up with the first flight. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, now to get started, let's talk about something as simple as the box that your Phantom comes in. You should always keep the original packaging. This comes in handy for a couple reasons. One, if you ever need to ship it somewhere for repairs, to store it, or even if you're going to sell it in the future, it's always good to have the original box. Another thing I'd like to point out is that on the end of your Vision box, you're going to have your barcodes, your serial numbers, and a QR code here. Now, we have had a couple customers that for some reason on both a Vision and a Vision Plus lost connectivity between their range extender and their Phantom, and they had a lot of trouble getting those to relink up again. And what we found out is that while we have never had to use the QR code to link ours up, that if for some reason you lose that link in the future, or maybe you're linking up with a friend's copter and then you can't get back to yours, using this barcode, this QR code, is your unique serial number identification so that you can link up to your range extender. So another reason to either take a picture of this or keep the original box, or even if you're not going to use the box, just cut the end off and save it for you. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the unboxing of the Phantom Vision Plus. Now, once you open your box up, you will see the inside packaging. Now, once you get to here, go ahead and take off the DJI wrap here. And then you're going to pull off the creating material. Now let's take a look and talk about a couple of the items that are in the box here. Get this out of the way. The first thing you're obviously going to see is your Phantom Vision. Now when you pull this out, your original battery will be installed. Your camera is installed. You want to make sure when you first take it out that the gimbal lock was still on there and that it didn't come loose in shipping. Because obviously if it was thrown around and banged around excessively, this would be a reason to stop unpacking it right here and call the dealer that you bought it from and let them know that you could potentially have an issue with your gimbal. So everything looks intact here. We're going to go ahead and set that aside. Now in the box you have a couple other smaller boxes. We have the propellers. This includes 2 complete sets of the self-tightening propellers. The larger interior box is going to contain your manuals as well as your charging kit, which does come with the foreign adapters if you're outside of the US. Inside of the manual box, you will have, of course, manuals and quick start guides. You are also going to have some additional sticker sets should you decide to change the color, as well as warranty and safety information. Again, make sure you read the manual. At a minimum, read the quick start and the pilot training guides, especially if you're new to the hobby. Go ahead and set that aside. Now, deep down inside the box, they do give you 4 AA batteries. These are good quality batteries. I typically, on my copters that I fly for personal use, I go out and I buy a nice set of rechargeable batteries, and I keep 2 sets of 4, and I can just keep rotating them. But you do get batteries with the kit. When you pull out your radio, you're going to notice that the radio comes pretty much fully assembled. They do have the iPhone mount tightened down, and you will need to loosen these top 2 screws and bring it around to the front to get it in the right position. They do have a wrap on the radio that gives you basic directions on what the different sticks do, and everything else is set up for you. Now, one thing that's different on the Vision copters versus like a Phantom 2 is that your S1 and S2 switches are not labeled. They're not labeled because out of the box, they really don't do anything. The only thing the S1 switch does out of the box is enable you to calibrate your compass by simply switching it up and down several times, and we'll get into that later. But out of the box, some people are confused of what these do or what they don't do, and to give you the right information, they don't do anything out of the box except for calibrate your compass. And again, we'll get into that later when we switch from Phantom mode to Naza mode. All right, that's all that's in the box. Let's go ahead and talk about how we prep the Phantom. All right, now I know many of you are probably excited to get the props on, get this thing out and start flying it, but there's a few things you really should do before you take your first flight. Now obviously you need to charge the battery, so let's go ahead and cover how we do that. Again, make sure you have your gimbal lock on, and I tell you that because what happens if this is your first Phantom, you're going to realize this battery is fairly hard to pull out. And if you yank it out while you don't have a gimbal lock on there, your gimbal is going to flop around kind of violently. So I recommend leaving that on. Hold your Phantom from the top, grab the top and bottom tabs, and pull directly out, and you won't have any problems. Set the copter aside, and let's go ahead and open up the charging box, and we will get into how we get this thing on the charger and get going. All right, now in the charging package, you're going to have your AC adapter with charging lead on it. This has a protective cover that simply pops open. You want to fold it all the way open and insert it into the battery this way. Now that can only go one way. There's no way to possibly put it in wrong. Now you're going to have to plug it into the wall first, of course. So what we have here is the AC cord. Now if you're in a foreign country, they do give you some of the other adapters. For us in the US, we can just set those aside. You're not going to need them. To plug in the cord, you're just simply going to plug in the adapter, plug this into your wall outlet. Once it's powered up and you see the light come on the charger, you're going to simply plug in the battery until you see the lights light up, and it'll continue to charge. Now, one of the other accessories that comes in the charger kit is this micro USB cable. Now, this is going to be used for a couple reasons. Set these aside here. On the very front of your copter, you have a small port right here. Now, this just simply lifts open. This is where all firmware updates are done, and this is also how you calibrate things and check your IMU. So you want to know what that port's for. You can also use the same cable to access your video and stills off of your camera by plugging in directly in the back here. Now this plugs in to a standard USB port on your computer. You plug in the small port in the back and it shows up just like an external hard drive. If you don't want to bring the whole copter inside, you can also remove the SD card or the micro SD card by simply pushing it in and it'll pop out. You will need a micro SD card adapter to do that. Now, one other thing that many of you may not know is that the controller itself can also be upgraded when firmware updates come out. It has a port directly on the bottom here, and there's actually an RC Assistant software to do that. Now, we're going to cover all this in the software portion. But be aware that these are the ports you need to be aware of. Radio, the front of the Phantom, and then the back of the camera to access your video and stills. Now, one other thing this is used for, once you're done with your firmware updates, is leaving that plugged into your PC. You also need to charge up the Wi-Fi extender by just simply plugging this in. Now, when you first plug it in and it's plugged into your computer, this power light will light up orange, indicating that it's charging, and when it's done, it'll be complete. They do say that it takes up to about 4 hours for a full charge, but once you do have it fully charged, it does last quite a while. And the benefit of the Vision Plus over the Vision is that the iPhone app or Android app does give you an indication of the battery level, and it shows that in the application. Okay, we have installed the Naza Assistant software. We've downloaded it from the DJI website. We've got it installed. We have our Phantom plugged in via the micro USB port in the front. We've removed our gimbal stabilizer because we don't want that on when we power up. And we have a fully charged battery in here. It's important that if you're doing firmware or software updates to always use a fully charged battery. The last thing you want to do when you're in the middle of a software update is have your battery die in the middle and have the firmware get corrupt. So we've got a fully charged battery. We're going to go ahead and power up the Phantom for the first time here by simply pressing the power button once, letting go, followed by a long hold press. Now you'll notice right away it says we're currently at 3.0 and we have an upgrade to 3.04. So to do that, we're going to simply hit the upgrade button. It says, do we really want to upgrade? Yes. We don't want to power it down or do anything. We have our props off, so we say yes. Now the Phantom will usually beep during this process. Alright, it took that fast to do the update. Now before you hit the OK button, go ahead and do what it tells you to do in the message, which is power cycle. So I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to hit the OK button. Alright, now we're going to simply power the Phantom back up again. And under the upgrade screen here, we'll see if there's any other updates. Now it looks like there was. So the central board, which is P330CB, has an update from .27 to .31. And you can see that it's automatically doing that. A lot of people don't realize that on some of these updates, when you plug in, it will automatically do the upgrade. So you need to be aware of that. If you do not want to do an upgrade, you need to make sure that your Wi-Fi or your internet is turned off to your computer. So we're going to, before we hit the OK button, we're going to go ahead and power cycle again. Okay, we're off. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. And we'll turn the Phantom back on. Alright, now you can see here we have the latest updates. We have no updates on these other items. And we are good to go, and we're ready to start calibrating the Phantom for its first flight. So what I like to say is start from the left and work your way right, just like when you're reading a book. Start with the view screen. Make sure your radio is turned on at this point. You don't need your extender turned on because we're not using that at this point. We're more concerned with the control of the copter. As I move the sticks around, you can see that I'm getting movement there. And you can see some of the other settings here. Nothing else you really need to mess with. This is all set by default. So we'll go ahead and go to the Basic tab. And you can see under Basic we have two tabs, RC and Gain. Do not mess with the gains. These are all set by the factory. If you do mess with them, you can simply hit the default button to set them back. Let's go to RC, and the first thing I recommend people do out of the box is a calibration of the sticks. So we're going to simply hit the Start button. We're going to take our controller and move the sticks to all four corners of the controller. Now you may notice your gimbal or your camera moving left or right during this process. This is totally normal, as in flight the gimbal's actually offsetting what you're doing with the yaw sticks. So once you've run it through all four corners, you just hit the Finish button. And it tells you to leave the controller still and don't power cycle. And we say OK. That's it to calibrate the sticks. We already talked about the gain, so we're going to skip to the next tab, which is the Advanced tab. Now under here, this is all the default settings. Now I'm using a battery that's already been flown a few times, and a lot of people don't know that you can actually check your batteries using the assistant software. This particular battery has been charged or discharged 7 times. It's at a 98% charge, and it has about 98% of its life left. The threshold cutoffs, 30% is your first warning, critical is 15. Some people do lower these down to 20 or within this range here. But again, keep in mind that when it hits 30s, when you're going to get your first battery warning. After that, it's going to start auto landing. So if you don't give yourself enough room to get back, you may end up in the water or on somebody's house or something else. So I typically tell people, leave these where they're at by default. Now the limit switch, or the limit tab, this is all default here. Max height of 1640. This is in feet because I have the feet set right here. If you're in a meters area or you like meters, you can change it to meters or miles, but feet is typically what we use in the US. 1640 on the height and 4,921 on the radius. Now we've been hearing a lot of people in the news flying up in helicopter range and in airports and everything else. If you feel you're tempted to do that or you don't want to do that, you can simply highlight this and set whatever altitude you want. You want to be at 400 feet? Set it to 400 feet. The Phantom will not go above 400 feet. But by default, these are the settings you get. The second tab is the flight limits and special areas. This is kind of a convoluted diagram, but it basically shows you what happens in the different airspaces for the no-fly zones and where you'll be limited to. So if you're flying in and you're out here in this blue zone, you can still fly, but as you get closer to the airport, it forces you down, and then when you're in the red zone, you can't even take off. Now keep in mind that if you're in ADI mode and you have actually went into the advanced settings, which we're going to cover in a minute, you can actually override that GPS and still fly in areas if you've had permissions. But by default, leave it the way it is. All right, we're going to go up to the Tools tab. Now this is the most important thing I tell people. When you first get your Phantom, before you're tempted to go out and fly it the first time, everybody talks about the compass calibration, but the compass is something totally different from the IMU, which is the internal measurement unit. This is the Naza that's inside of the Phantom. You want to, at minimum, do a basic calibration, because these things have been kicked around by the delivery guy. They've been shipped all over the world. You need to make sure that from where you're sitting right now, on a level platform, level table or desk, that you do a basic calibration. And all you have to do is click the basic calibration. It tells you to keep it level and stationary. Don't be touching it. Hit the yes button. Doesn't take very long, goes right across. And we get a green check mark here. Now you could even follow it up by a check IMU status. It says no calibration needed. We're done. Now if you have a bad accident, you crash, you fall out of a tree, somebody throws your case out of an airplane, you may have to jump over to the Advanced tab and do an advanced calibration. And that it works the same way. Now some people say, well, I get a warning that says the controller's too hot. Just simply hit the X when you get that warning and let it run through. Now the advanced calibration can take up to 5 to 10 minutes to do, but it will run through it. Don't unplug anything and don't power anything down. But for the most part, basic calibration and checking the IMU status is all you need to do. We'll follow over to the upgrade screen, which is where we were already at when we first started. Everything is still good. And then the info just talks about your account that you set up with the assistant software and what version your actual assistant software is. So just to recap, after we did the firmware upgrade, which was the first thing we did, we went to the first tab, we checked that our radio was working, we did a RC calibration, followed by checking our limits and our battery information, and then we went to Tools, we did a basic calibration, and we did an IMU status. Now we're ready to install the props, take it outside into a wide open area with no metal, radio interference, chain link fences, car hoods or trunks. You want to be away from anything that's metal and do a compass calibration as it outlines in the quick start guide. Alright, now once we've got all of our firmware updates and software updates done, and we're about ready to take it outside, we want to install the props. Now, simply take off these warning covers. You don't need them anymore. And you'll notice that the top of two of the motors has what looks like a black Sharpie mark on them, and the other two are silver. There's also a little indentation on the black ones, and there's not on the silver ones. On the top of each set of props, each set comes with a black tip and a silver tip, and of course they go color coordination wise, black to black and silver to silver. Now, each prop, it's hard to see because they're white, has an indication to lock and unlock, and each prop motor has an indication of the direction for the normal spin of the motor. So black ones go on counterclockwise, and you just spin them until they stop. Silver ones go on clockwise. Now once they stop, all you need to do is grab the motor, give it a little snug. Grab the motor, a little snug. We're going to get into the prop wrench that's included and what that is actually for. You do not need to wrench these props down. They are self-tightening, meaning that they will actually tighten up when the motor starts up. In the accessory box, they give you some tools, a few extra gimbal buffers, and some extra screws and some landing gear pads. And one of the things that's in this accessory pack here is a prop wrench. And let's take a look at that. Now what this is used for is over time and after several flights, these motors are spinning and they're tightening the props down even tighter. Temperature changes, hot and cold, can make things snug up tighter than you can undo the prop. So if you ever get to a point where you need to change your prop and it's too tight, You take the wrench out, simply lay it over one of the motor splines, and look for the symbol to unlock the prop. Hold the wrench, and just turn the prop in the unlock position. And it comes off, just like that. To put the prop back on, simply set it on the threads, spin it till it stops, give it a little snug, it's on. The wrench is not needed to tighten down the propeller. Now I want to talk a little bit about the gimbal on here, because this seems to be a big topic on all the forums, that the gimbal's bad and it should be recalled. Folks, let me tell you, the gimbal on these is very precise. It's a very precise piece of machinery, and it needs to be treated as such. Don't expect to fly into a tree and fall out of a tree 20 feet up and expect this gimbal to survive. This is not a 4x4. This is a highly tuned, very precise piece of machinery with very extensive electronics and a very precise gimbal on here. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when you power this up, have your lock off. If you don't have the lock off, after time you potentially could damage the motors, because the motors are trying to level the gimbal and you're of course locking it down. You do get a notification on the iPhone app that you need to remove your gimbal lock. Now to remove it, I simply hold the camera steady and slide it out like this, off to the side. And then you also have a lens cap on there. Now sometimes you'll notice it almost has like a suction to it. Just give it a little twist, pull it straight off, and there's your camera. Make sure that your camera gimbal is moving freely and smoothly, it's not bent, that all your isolators and your cushions are not torn or damaged. Some people have a question, well, what is this little plastic thing here? There's not one over here, but there's one in the back here too. What this does, folks, is keep your gimbal from separating. Because the cushions are the only thing holding the top to the bottom, if for some reason we had a hard landing or we struck something, there's a potential that this gimbal could pull away from those rubber cushions, and if we didn't have something there to stop it, the gimbal would simply fall off. So this is supposed to be there. It is supposed to be loose. It's not supposed to be tight. So that's what those are for. Now to put your gimbal back on, and again, we talked about installing and removing the battery. I highly recommend putting your gimbal protector back on when you go to take your battery off. Simply line up the gimbal, wrap it around the body, and then you need to make sure that it slides behind the portions on the bottom of the gimbal there, and make sure it's nice and tight and everything is good, and you're good to go. Now it can go in a case, you can travel with it, do whatever you need to do, but you need to protect that gimbal and you need to treat it with respect, because if you don't, you will have issues with it. Alright, so we're powering up this Phantom Vision Plus for the first time here. We've got our Wi-Fi repeater on, we've got the radio on. We'll go ahead and turn on the Phantom Vision. You'll see that cables, or the camera is going to stabilize there. Next thing I want to do is link up my iPhone by turning on the Wi-Fi and actually connecting to the Phantom's Wi-Fi repeater. There it is. Go ahead and touch the Phantom. And you'll see the Phantom with basically a serial number after it. That's how you know you're on the, you're actually connected to the Phantom. You go ahead and touch the Phantom Vision app, and we should have the video coming in here any second. Now while we're waiting for that, we can see we have 100% battery life in our Wi-Fi repeater. We have a 98% battery, we have a Wi-Fi signal, and we've already got, looks like 4 satellites. So once we get to 6 satellites, we'll be ready to do our compass calibration, meaning that we have a GPS lock. Now to do the compass calibration, why don't you bring the camera down low and behind here. You'll notice that there's some lights in the bottom of here that are flashing. To get into compass calibration mode, we're going to take the S1 switch and rapidly flip it 5 to 10 times until that light goes solid. Okay, it's now solid. I'm going to pick the Phantom up, Make sure you're in a wide open space with no interference, no metal around there. And if you keep an eye on these yellow lights here, I'm going to rotate around counterclockwise, 360 degrees. And if you keep an eye on those lights, when we get to the 360, they'll turn green. We want to go nose down and do another 360. And if you watch those lights, we have now completed the compass calibration. We can now take it back and set it to our takeoff position and wait for the solid GPS lock. Okay, now that we've got our home lock, meaning we've got that rapid flashing green and it's now going to a slow flashing green, we're going to go ahead and arm the motors. Now I like to do on the first flight, I like to arm the motors and let them just idle for a second and make sure everything's operating correctly. Now to make them start idling, we're going to push both sticks down into the center. I'm just going to let it sit there for a second. Everything looks like it's operating normally. I'm going to disarm the motors by pulling down and to the left, and they all shut down properly. So now I feel it's safe to fly. I'm going to go ahead and arm them again. And then we'll slowly advance the throttle to about the 75% position for takeoff. I don't want to fly too high, I just want to get out there in a nice open area and let it hover for a second. Make sure I've got the green flashing light, which you can see on the bottom of the copter. Everything seems to be fairly stable. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little right bank, make sure all the controls are working properly. A little left bank. We'll fly forward. Fly backwards. Go ahead and do a full rotation. And that wasn't perfect. Let's see if we can do that again. Now if anything doesn't seem right, it's best to just land and restart the process over again. Now it seems to be holding a lot better now. Try some Alright, when you're ready to bring it in for a landing, you want to slowly descend by bringing your left throttle lever down. Now the new firmware limits how fast you can descend, which will save you, because as you descend down through your prop wash, you can get a little turbulence there and it can make it a little uneasy. Now when you get down within about 3 feet of the ground, I highly recommend that you let it hover for a second. Make sure everything is still functioning properly. Make sure that you're in a stable hover. I'm going to actually bring it back to this sidewalk here. I'm going to slowly reduce the power. Now when I get within a few feet, I'm going to stop my descent, verify that everything is flying still, and then I'm going to slowly bring that power down. You don't want any lateral forward or backward movement. Once I get down to where I want to land, I'm going to smoothly reduce the throttle, and as soon as I touch down, I want to pull that throttle stick down and to the left to cut off the power. Once the props have stopped, the stick is now safe to operate. You can then walk over to the Phantom and shut the main battery power off. Now it's safe to handle. You can then turn off your Wi-Fi repeater, followed by your radio last. That's it. All right, now I want to talk about another feature that many people don't know about, or they don't know how to correctly set it up. On the RC screen, you're going to see that there's really no other settings here except for calibrating the sticks. Now you're going to notice there's a little gray box up the top here that says Phantom. If we click on that gray box, we have a big long message here that says, do not enable the Naza M, blah, 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 Phantom training guide. It talks about this is advanced features and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to show you what that does and what the benefits and drawbacks are for a new pilot starting out. So we're going to go ahead and hit the yes, that we're an experienced user and that we want to switch to the Naza M mode. Yes. Okay, now you're going to notice something changed here. We got a couple more icons and also it says Naza M here now. So when I first talked about the S1 switch essentially doing nothing out of the box, that's correct, because what it originally did was essentially safe mode, safe mode, safe mode. But now you can see that we can enable GPS, which is the full up position, attitude mode, and then all the way down either attitude mode, fail safe, or manual. Now I do not recommend manual if you've never flown before. What I usually do is set this up as a fail-safe, meaning that if I want it to fly home to me for any reason, I lost control, I can't find out where it is, so on and so forth, I can get this thing to fly back to me by simply pulling the switch back. So I have GPS, ADDI, fail-safe, and what I highly recommend doing at this point is actually switching and making sure not only that you see these changes here, but that did you see them happening down here as well, because that's what's really indicating whether or not the radio signal is being transmitted correctly. Now your S2 switch will indicate being moved from right here. Now this is the IOC feature. Now we're good to go there. We've already calibrated the sticks. You can calibrate them again. If you let go in the all center, you're probably good to go. Now if we go to the IOC, the advanced tab, you can see now we have some other things. The IOC showed up here. By default, failsafe means go home and land. You could also just have it land where it's at, but that's not recommended. And then the IOC is here, which is the Intelligent Orientation Control. Now this is what you can assign to switch to. By default, again, it does nothing. But if I turn it on by selecting this box, I now have off in the up position, course lock, and home lock. And you'll have to read the manual to describe, to get the description of what those do. But essentially, when you're on the ground before takeoff and you've got your GPS signal, when you're ready to take off and you have the Phantom pointed away from you in the general directions you plan on flying, to set your magnetic heading for this course lock to work, you're going to flip the S2 switch down one time, and you're going to see a quick yellow blip on your rear lights, and then you can turn it back off. And what you've essentially done at that point is set your magnetic heading so that if you get out a ways and you're not sure which way is forward and back and left and right, you can simply switch that S2 switch all the way down to home lock and pull your right stick back towards you, and no matter which way the Phantom is heading, it will actually come back towards you. So that's the benefit of Intelligent Orientation Control.